I want to call to order the work session on the SAP. We'll begin with introduction of assembly members, starting with you, Ms. Johnson.
Jennifer Johnson, Assembly.
Bernie Hall, Assembly.
Paul Holman, Assembly.
Tim Steele, Assembly.
Toby Green.
Nick Trainee, Assembly.
I'll make note that Ms. Dembowski is here. She just stepped out to grab a cup of coffee and will rejoin us shortly.
Paul's gone to make, let's see, Pat went to make money, he told me.
Okay, very good. Mr. Ahern, would you like to, are you doing the presentation? Anyone else joining you?
We've got lights under control somewhere.
Can we have the lights dim?
Lights.
Lance, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. So, I'm here to talk about 3 different items. Specifically, the quality assessment that was performed for the city last summer. That was performed by SAP and the results of that. I'm also going to talk about the current status of our SAP implementation and the current status of the Chronos interface. If anybody's had any trouble hearing me, I can either slow down or speak louder, whatever you want. So, just to kind of reset the stage, because this was a year ago, why we did the quality assessment. We did it because we, at that time, understood that there were some serious flaws in the project. And so we wanted to bring in SAP to help us understand. They have a professional services division. They do these quality assessments for all kinds of customers. So we wanted them to evaluate the Black & Veatch team, the proposed solution that they were delivering to us, and basically the process that they were following to implement the solution. We also obviously selected SAP because we don't have that kind of SAP experience within the organization. We don't run that system, so we really wanted to bring in somebody who knew the system inside out. We also wanted to really have a good basis for an additional negotiation for a contract amendment that was coming up, considering that the project was seriously behind. And part of the idea of having a quality assessment is that in the future, if you need to do another one, you've got the baseline to compare it to. So what I'm going to do briefly, I've picked out parts of the contract to show you in terms of the scope of what was tasked for SAP to evaluate. There were pages of different specific tasks that they were asked to look at, and they have a fairly standard program for how they do a quality assessment. So the governance of the project, the communication within the team, the project management, how we manage the scope of the project, the cost, communications, everything about the business solution, so the blueprint is what we call that, the design, and functional specifications, everything captured at that point. What we call organizational change management, how we prepare the organization to actually accept the new system once it's been delivered, considering nobody has ever seen it before. And the whole test plan, so how the process that we go through to test is to make sure it meets our business needs before we accept it and sign off on it and pay for it and start using it. Additionally, end user training and documentation is obviously a really major part, so we wanted them to evaluate the plan of work that they did on to date. Then, of course, there's a whole technology side in terms of the infrastructure that was put together, the training around that, lots and lots of different tasks. So we put that together. They brought in a team of people, very experienced people. They spent 4 days up here with us. They interviewed pretty much everybody in the MOA side of the project, all the team leads. They interviewed project managers from both MOA and Black & Veatch. They looked at what's called Solution Manager, which is the system that we use to manage all this stuff, where the project documents are kept. They looked at the actual project plan and schedule. And so they evaluated all that. What you're going to see is basically what you expect: green, yellow, red. You're actually going to see mostly red. It's going to be really clear that we're presenting exactly what they need to us. We're not trying to hide anything. So they looked at all those different areas. And what I didn't mention is that there are actually 2 things that they delivered for us. So they did a project management review and they did a solution review. The project management review is how is this being run as a project? The solution review is what's being developed for the city, how appropriate that is, is it the right solution for us? Did the vendor actually follow all the guidance that we gave them in terms of an out-of-the-box solution, minimal customization, all that kind of stuff? So this first part, I'm going to go through, is just the project management review. And so clearly there were a lot of problems, which, to be honest, it's exactly what we expected. That's why we brought them in. It had to do with the, again, a lot of it was around managing the communication within the project team, the different folks who needed to be talking together, who weren't, both within the MOA team and within Black and Beach team and between the different teams. It was about the, some of the different things that we had done. Some of this was actually, like I said, okay. The organizational change management we had pretty good control over. We're making good progress in terms of developing training, but in terms of the actual project management, there were a lot of problems in the project. So what they did is then they started to break that dashboard down into some very specific items. The ownership of the project in terms of the leadership within the project, taking ownership of developing the solution, the whole organizational change management process, so how we were meeting with our customers, preparing them for what the new finance and ERP system was going to look like, and the budgeting system. The actual management of the schedule of the project was clearly the biggest issue. It had been behind schedule for a long time, and that's always been a problem with this project. And basically some issues around the technical details of the project, all the data conversion, what has to happen, a lot of details around how the system will be populated with new data when we get ready to turn it on. So there were many pages of findings like this. Basically, here's one example where they said the project manager that we had contracted at the time, third-party project manager, really didn't have the SAP experience needed. The team wasn't working well together. So they gave us some recommendations, which we followed. We basically replaced our contract project manager at the time. We co-located the entire project management team because they were really off working at different locations, not communicating with each other. And so there were a lot of very specific findings and recommendations that they gave us. Now that was the project management side of the review. Briefly, there was also a solution review. And again, there are many pages like this of different aspects of the project. Sure.
Just briefly, can you just explain what FERC is?
FERC is the, you want to translate?
Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
Thanks. It is the, basically there's a,
utilities.
it's the utilities, there's an aspect of the system, what we've licensed from SAP is a public sector solution, which allows us to also implement a solution for regulated utilities. And so there are significant FERC requirements built into our project beyond what a normal government entity would have to implement. We have to deliver a solution that will meet all of our FERC requirements. So again, they reviewed, as an example, the various aspects of the FERC design that had been prepared, and they identified a bunch of problems that we could see downstream in terms of either reporting or the functionality within the FERC system that had not yet been developed, was behind schedule. And so what they gave us for each of those two deliverables, the project management review and a solution review, was this template, an action plan. For the project management review, this is a 20-page long document that just lists, here's all of your problems, and here's our recommendations. We have a similar thing like this on the solution side that is 50 pages long, the same thing. Here's all of the recommendations that we're suggesting you should make to help get this project back on track. And so what we did was we took those templates and we created a response plan. And Diane, RDI, one of our project managers, was very instrumental in helping us work with this and kind of prepare and track all of this, make sure we were doing what we were told. And basically what we did was we identified there are more than 300 line items in this response plan. And what we did was respond to everything that SAP had recommended to us about how we should make changes in the project. So this is the very top of the plan, and it's a medium risk item. But one example is that Black and Beach had configured a solution for us that required us to track 90, I think they call it business areas within the SAP solution. And we knew that that was very high, but we really weren't able on our own to get Black and Beach to change that. SAP came in and told us why that was a problem and helped us work with the vendor to come up with a solution that only had 17 business areas. So it's a much simpler system to maintain and to configure. 17 actually is a very high number. In our particular case, we have requirements that all the LRSAs really have to be tracked separately from a financial standpoint, and that's why there's so many. If we didn't have that, there'd probably be 4. So basically, we found the whole QA process was very helpful. You know, in a sense, you bring in very expensive consultants, you tell them what's wrong, and they help you organize that and help you come up with a plan to respond to that. We fully implemented the response plan that we prepared. We were able to use the information from the QA to negotiate the no-cost amendment to the Black & Veatch contract, and that's what's basically been supporting Black & Veatch over the last 9 months, roughly. It's been a no-cost extension for them for 9 months. And in the future, it may be that we decide to use the QA again to help support any future issues that might arise. And again, we have a baseline in the project from the previous QA to compare progress against. So if you have any questions now, before I jump into the next thing, about the QA process that we went through and the results, or any specific questions?
Got
I'd be glad to.
Jennifer and then Paul.
Have you seen any problems as far as the Black & Veatch contract since our amendment was cost-free? Has there been any time element that's been challenged because of that? Has there been any slowdown? Are we having the staffing that we need?
So when we came up with the no-cost contract amendment, it included their commitment of a bunch of resources who were already on the team to continue in the project for specific time periods. And what we found is that, for example, there were people who were scheduled to leave the project from their team at the end of March or the end of April. And what we found was that typically nobody on the MOA team felt that we were prepared for them to move. And, I'll say we kind of fought back. We had extended discussions about that. All of those people have continued to bond at the project, in the project long beyond what they were actually committed in the plan that we agreed to. So that's gone relatively well.
So the staffing with Black & Veatch has not been hurt to a large degree?
They have had some key people leave who have been replaced. It's an interesting situation because a lot of the Black & Veatch employees who signed up on the project and some of their subs who signed up, they signed up for one winter in Glasgow, right? And so they were well beyond what they had prepared to commit initially. But I think Black & Veatch has tried to do a very good job of managing that. And there's some key people who have left the project who will continue to come back as needed. They're on retainer contracts. So there's specific, for example, our first resource, therapy, there's specific things that only she can do with us. And so when required, they're required to bring her and other people back to work.
At no cost?
At no cost to us, under their contract.
Thank you.
Mr. Honor?
Well, and that begs the question, it may not be any cost in the contract land, but how many people are working? Are we talking about 10, 20, 30, 50? I mean, how many people are working on this QA and summary assessment and recommendation teams and things like that? How many people are we talking about?
So the QA actually finished last August, and we spent, I'd say, a month after the SAP QA was over. It was literally like a week-long engagement, and brought in the team to work with us for a week. And then we went through about a month-long process of them giving us recommendations, us coming up with a plan to how we're going to address those recommendations. Kind of just a back and forth before a final plan was developed. Separate from that, honestly, I can't tell you. I can get you more information.
Well, I just, if we're talking a couple, 3 people, you could probably shoehorn them in some of these offices that are existing. But my understanding is there's a whole team of people that are taking up a huge center of municipal property.
So the Black & Veatch team, just that group, is, I'm going to say, 25 to 30 people, including some of their subs.
And where are they working at?
Primarily out of the Anchorage Fire Department training
What's
center.
that costing us? What's that delay of being able to use their rooms for training and or rentals for something? What's that dollar amount?
So I don't know. It depends on what the rates charge and what they would normally book. We can come up. I think they may have provided fire department may provide an estimate in the past about what the potential impact was to their budget, but I don't know. But I'd be glad to find out.
Thank you.
Mrs. Gray Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to preface my questions with the fact that I truly understand that this municipality is in dire need of a new ERP system, so that is not my issue whatsoever, okay? I just sat through PeopleSoft, and I don't want to see the same thing happen that happened with PeopleSoft, which I think we're getting close, frankly. Okay, so I have several questions, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
When is the go-live date? Is it still going to be October, or we're not
The
sure?
live date is still
As of today?
As of today, the contractor, and there's actually something I'll be getting up to in just a minute in terms of the SAP project status, but they're still committed to a October 1st go-live date.
Oh, okay, thank you. And are there currently any serious flaws in the project?
There are two that I'm aware of. One is strictly a technical issue in terms of right now, the way the system is configured. There's this 20-minute timeout that happens on certain work that is scheduled that should just go through. It's purely a technical thing because clearly there are many thousands of organizations that are running that don't have a 20-minute timeout issue. So we'll work with SAP, we'll fix it. I'm not worried about that. There is an issue with the reporting solution that's been designed and is being delivered now to the unit. And at a high level, basically, there were different ways that they could have delivered a reporting solution to us. And I would say that what they've designed and are planning to deliver to us doesn't exactly match our licensing with SAP. So there's a worst case scenario that says we might potentially need to go back to SAP and do some additional licensing. But our expectation, we've already discussed this with SAP, and we expect that they're simply going to allow us to waive those licensing, that case to just allow us to use the solution that's
Okay,
been.
so there are two serious flaws. Are there any other flaws that aren't so serious, but still a
In
flaw?
terms of the solution, no. I don't think.
Period, flaws, period, yeah. Because I know I asked serious flaws, and now I'm asking
Right.
other flaws.
I think the real concern that we continue to raise with our integrator, Black & Veatch, is that, as people have left the project, more and more of the project has funneled through Luke Payette, who's he used to be the project manager. He's now what we call the business solution architect. He's the guy who knows this both from a technical and a business point of view more than anybody else. So he's a single point of failure. There's way too much of the project that has to run through him. People getting questions answered, design changes made. So to me, that's the most serious concern that I have, that how much of this is dependent on he being available, he being timely in responses, when so many people really are looking to him for leadership, for making decisions.
And why was cost management not reviewed in the Q&A?
What is cost management?
Yeah, we're looking at this. Thank you, Mr. Steele showed it to me because I missed it. But cost management was not reviewed in the Q&A on the pages aren't numbered. Executive summary, cost management, topic not reviewed. And my question is, why wasn't cost management?
Oh, I'm sorry. It was in the scope of work, but because the project was a fixed price contract, there wasn't a time and material aspect to it. That was the basis for not doing any real deep review of it.
But I think cost management is really important regardless.
It's being
and
actively managed.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, but please allow me to go on because I have I think 2 more questions and maybe more before we're done. The FERC requirements, are the issues resolved? Because that's a really big deal. That's our utilities.
Right. And the solution that has been provided to the community, the one that we're implementing, meets all of the business requirements that we've set out. So as we complete the testing process, if there are any defects in what they've given us, we'll identify that, we'll have them fix it. In the end, we're not going to go live with any part of this until all of the different folks, the ER team, payroll, finance, both the utilities, all have to sign up and say this actually meets the business requirements before
Right.
we'll accept it and pay for it and use it.
Right, so the answer is they're not resolved yet. Still working on it. Which is okay, but...
We're in integration testing,
Oh,
and so
okay.
we expect to find defects in various pieces of the solution until they're all resolved.
Okay. All right, the assembly appropriated $175,000 for the Q&A. What was the final cost for the Q&A?
I'm gonna say roughly was, I believe, 168. I can get the exact number for you, but there was a little bit
Appreciate
that wasn't spent.
Thank you. That's it for now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Trini?
Mr. Chairman, was Lucinda invited to attend this meeting? Where is she?
As far as the specific invitation to Lucinda, I did not. I went through Lucinda to set it up, and Lance is who she wanted to have.
As much like Paul, I've got a real question as to the amount of city properties being utilized over at the fire training center. And I want to know, are we getting reimbursed for that or what? We're just giving them free rent?
I'm sure we can get those answered. Lance indicated that he could.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. I've got Diane taking notes for me, so I'll have a list of things to get for you out there.
That's all I've got to you. Before we begin again, I want to make clear, we didn't start till 1 or 12:35, so I intend to run 5 after 1, and then it'll depend if the body wants to extend.
I thought we were noticed to 1:30, Mr. Chairman.
We are. This is an hour
It says
work
1:30.
session.
Oh, I'm
That's
sorry.
right.
Okay. Good. You got a lot of time.
But if you decided it early,
Go.
I understand. So, I'm going to talk next about the status of the SAP.
Can we get the lights, please?
Thank you. So, you've actually seen this slide before in a previous presentation from Lucinda. There have been a few changes to it. The top 2 boxes, integration testing and acceptance testing. We've agreed with the integrator to really roll those into a single testing phase. We think it'll allow us to get board done more quickly. The user training at the bottom right has really, we've agreed with vendor that some of that can happen after the go live date, so some of that is going to extend beyond. But aside from that, aside from, some things finishing later than they should be, like the integration test scripting, all of that stuff, this is all current activity within the project that's going on. So what I wanted to show you was every week Black & Beach produces a project status report, and the 4 key categories that they track for the project in terms of the risk to the schedule, the scope of the project, any major issues in the project, and just overall risk. And basically, since the contract amendment kicked in and we started working against the new project plan and new project schedule back in early March, what Black & Beach has delivered to us is this kind of dashboard of results. And there's a lot more to this, but what I want to do is highlight this. This is where I would say, I have some concern because I look at this and I would say that this is a very positive view of where the project actually is. But, this is how they're currently tracking progress against the project. They have not at any time identified that the schedule of the project has been read at any time since we went into the new contract amendment. So they are still telling us that they are committed to the October 1st go live. One of the things that we've actually done a really good job of working together with Black & Beach is managing any change orders to the project. So any additional scope of work, new work to the project that wasn't included in the original plan. For a project of this size and complexity and cost, this is well below normal. This is absolutely minimal. So that's been good in terms of not introducing any additional costs or delays into the project. And this is a pretty good example of, we're certainly not hiding anything from you here. There's a lot of bad news on this page. What this is showing you is that as of about 2 weeks ago, these are all the major areas under milestone where the project is being worked on. This column is in the original project plan that was given to us, how many hours were expected to be worked on every aspect of the project. This is the original schedule that they gave us of when they thought each of these activities would be complete. This is the actual hours worked to date that Black & Beach is tracking within the project for everybody's time that's being spent on the project. So how much work has been accomplished against that. And this is their current projection of when each of these different activities actually complete. And so it's pretty clear that a lot of the project is finishing well beyond when it was originally scheduled to be finished. And that's a huge risk and a huge concern. Some of these are added activities that really don't begin.
Mr. Bridgetts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a quick question, if I may, Lance. The go live is October,
Yes.
right? I don't see October on there anywhere, except I see implementation ready,
Sure.
November 8th.
And I meant to speak to this, I'm sorry, I have my little notes and I'm not even looking at it. So basically,
Thank you,
there are
Mr.
two
Chairman.
items at the bottom there that complete well beyond the 10-1 deadline. Again, one was the user training, which we've agreed with the contractor, can't actually extend beyond 10-1, that there are elements that don't have
That
to be
makes
done.
sense.
The reason why implementation ready is showing that late date, I'll just say it's a problem right now with how they actually are using Microsoft Project and track the project. This is linked to this. This is linked to basically, have the longest pole in the tent for all these different activities. So we need to work with the vendor to make some changes to how they track the project so that this isn't tied directly to this. It shouldn't be in this one.
So I guess if I may, my follow-up question is, Mr. Chairman, and I'm not making accusations by no means, but the administration says October 1st is the go-live date. Is Black and Beach saying November is the
No.
go-live date?
Black and Beach is telling us in writing October 1st. So at the time that this is part of a much larger project status report we get each week, and in that project status report, they're still telling us 10-1 is the date. This is kind of just an artifact of the way they set up Microsoft Project, and they really need to fix that. And we'll talk to them about that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Ernie, quick question for you.
Yes.
Can we get a copy of this on CD? Because I want to work off my computer. I appreciate the paper, but they can give me a CD with this information. That's what I need.
Yes.
Thanks, Ernie.
We'll distribute it through Barbara.
Yeah, if you would.
Okay.
Thank you.
So one of the saving graces on this project is that when we set it up, we negotiated a significant portion of the fees of the project to be tied to actual performance on the project. So at this rate right now, again, based on the invoice schedule and the last contract amendment we negotiated, there's basically a monthly fee of about $80,000 that goes out each month. And in fact, the last payment will be on 9/3. Separate from that, there's about $2.7 million of performance payments for major deliverables that have not happened yet, that they will not get paid for until they deliver it, we test it, we accept it. Our customers, I should say IT, but the business accepts that the solution is working for them. That's when they actually get, again, retention payments, all of the payments that are tied to actual completion of the project. So the vast majority of what's outstanding to Black and Beach is all entirely dependent on their performance. I can answer any questions about that section if you like, or just go right into the Kronos interface.
Let's go ahead.
So briefly, we have SAP and we have the timekeeping system. There are 3 different timekeeping systems used by the Muni, 3 primary ones. MLP uses Kronos, we have a separate Kronos, and the water utility is Workday Time. The timekeeping systems are only used to basically evaluate time and send time records to SAP. SAP does all the pay evaluation. So functionally, logically, that's how it's all separated. The current system that we use today within GGU, within the Muni, we call that Kronos 2012. At some point, we took a copy of that, we made a brand new copy, and we're using that to build a brand new version of Kronos to work to be integrated with SAP. So we call that Kronos 2013. So if you ever hear about Kronos 2012, 2013, they're not 2 different products from the vendor, they're just 2 different versions that we're managing in-house. One to keep the business running today, and one that we will turn on that will be fully integrated with SAP at the time we go live. So today, we need to make changes to Kronos. We fix things get asked for, 370 or other changes may happen, and we have to go and make updates into the current production Kronos system to accommodate that. When we do that, we also evaluate which of those changes need to be made in the new system, so we're making the changes side by side. As we make changes in the new Kronos system, all the testing that we're doing for integration with the SAP has to happen in that system, because that's the system that will go live and will be used down the road. So SAP, we have about 70 major interfaces between SAP and lots of other systems that are used in Muni. MLP uses Power Plant, we have Maximo, which is used in both utilities. Kronos is probably the most complex interface that we have. It's called a bi-directional interface. Data has to flow back and forth both ways. We have to manage that. There's a lot of rules around that. And so, from my point of view, that's probably the highest risk, that we have outstanding at this point in terms of getting ready to turn the system on. That interface is fully tested, fully working. Because even if SAP is running beautifully, if that Kronos SAP interface isn't working perfectly, we can't turn it on. So that's a critical requirement of going live. There's a team actively working on it. You may know that we have a specialized consultant that just works on Kronos. They're called Improvisations. They've been working with us for a number of months, both on our current production system as well as the development of the new system. And this kind of touches some other things. So if you're familiar with police and fire, they use Telestaff. And so the Telestaff to Kronos interface with the new Kronos, all of that has to work as well. So there are a lot of different pieces to this, but they're all being actively worked on. They're all within the schedule of the current project plan. And we expect it all to go live at the same time. I only had the one slide for this, so I think basically I would be glad to answer any questions.
Mr. Honeman?
Lance, and this is more feedback from what I'm gathering from employees from around the city, and not just any one, but I can tell you concern, particularly in the area of Kronos, as it works too. And I can begin to tell you Telestaff or Kronos, but I do know that MLP has MLP Kronos, of course the AWU. But having worked around electronic payroll timekeeping at the federal level, state level, and now, of course, experience it through here, it seems that we're, and this may be not necessarily in the area of technology and how it works, interfacing and all that kind of stuff, but policy. And I'm just giving this as feedback from what I'm learning is it seems that we're more worried about whether a person's like 4 minutes ahead of their scheduled start time and 6 minutes after, or 5, maybe it's 4 minutes on either way or whatever, as opposed to a set schedule that you're platted into your computer that's kind of your norm. Given that some cases, some work units schedule change on a scheduled basis quarterly, every 3 months or 4 months or whatever. My point to the matter is, it seems more beneficial for service providers to the public and to people like myself looking for information to get a hold of somebody rather than them to be so focused on, oh geez, I can't do anything until I make sure that I get on, and if that computer bugs out or I get a little delay, I can't sign in, something happened and I'm 5, 6 minutes now, 8 minutes past the start time. And they're so concerned about that, the tail wagging the dog, so to speak, than it just being a set work schedule that's already pre-formatted. And in fact, if that schedule changes, it's up to the supervisor before it hits the payroll, the next level of checks to amend it. And it's just feedback that I'm getting, because it seems like that's what's causing most of the angst from the employee service deliverers. And whether that's an oversight by the people at the higher levels not seeing it, or not listening, or not really acknowledging that that's an issue, it's an issue. Because we're losing, in my opinion, we're losing valuable service time that we could be getting from the employee to the public, or to some guy like myself looking for information, than losing time worrying about whether or not they signed their computer in, that it's working. There's a lot of assumptions. And then they got to get in there, and then there's a set time frame. And they're so focused around a time frame rather than a schedule. And if the schedule's built in and pre-formatted, that thing shouldn't change for a period of time. And if it does change, then before the pay period ends in a workplace in the state, it's built in. And they basically say, hey, if by the payroll end date, if your time isn't in there, you get a 0. And so it's incumbent on the schedule to be in there, and it's incumbent on it to be accurate by the payroll, I guess, a reviewer or whatever. So I'm giving this as feedback loop, and this is, I think, about as good an opportunity as possible, because what I'm seeing here in this little phase is, we already acknowledge that there are already different versions at play. But now we're talking when we don't see APD Telestaff in there. So But my point is that it seems like we're so focused on making sure we get the system right, that we're forgetting about the service part. And I think that's the disruption.
Through the chair, I agree 1,000%. I think we've had opportunities at different points in when Kronos was being developed and in the life cycle where changes were proposed that would have made things even more difficult, where we were able to beta test and show people that those changes were not going to be useful for the community to run the business as it is. So we've always tried to be part of the process to help, but we don't set policy.
I understand. So maybe.
In the end, somebody
Maybe
tells
this
us the
goes back to
system has
the
to
city
work.
managers here, maybe this goes back to, maybe it's driving it out of payroll, I don't know if it's coming out of treasury, it's all Mr. Morgan, I don't know if it's coming out of finance, I don't know who's coming out of, but somebody needs to get that information and then try to integrate it in there. I just as an assessment on my own, having worked for the city, worked around the federal government, the EPA system, state's EPA system, I mean, it's not that difficult, guys. I mean, it really isn't. We're making it more difficult by letting the tail wag the dog, and it's just not really a wise thing. I'm just saying.
Through the chair, I would just add that a key design goal when Kronos was being initially designed and implemented was that it had to really fully support the requirements of the CPAs that we have in place. There's a huge amount of complexity, which I'm sure you've heard many times because of the differences among the CPAs. But again, that was a key requirement.
But remember that management has its rights to set its policy on how it's.
I look forward to policy changes.
I think that would be great. Great. Thank you.
Mr. Gray Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you're still working on the interface with Kronos and SAP?
Yes.
And before SAP can go live, that has to be working.
Yes.
So as it stands right now, October 1st is when you anticipate that happening.
Our current expectations
Right.
that will be fully.
Right, so what happens with the
developed.
interface, if the interface with Kronos and SAP isn't up to par by October 1st? I mean, that's kind of a rhetoric, but you don't really have to answer that.
Okay.
Okay, so what I'd like to know, and we've heard this before, but I want to hear it again, please, because I'm going from memory with my notes. But what's the total cost for Kronos to date and SAP?
Total cost?
For Kronos,
And it's,
yeah, all of it. And then SAP, I think it's 15 million, and if I'm incorrect, okay, what Chrono cost?
so
Yeah, everything.
I could bring it. I didn't bring the whole budget thing because I wasn't really going to speak to that. But
Give us
yeah,
an estimate and then the actual
Sure.
later.
I'd be glad to do it. I mean,
An estimate
roughly,
today.
it's basically roughly 15 million for SAP.
For SAP, yeah.
And I think it was about 1.1 total for Kronos. I'm not sure if that included some operating. I'd have to go back and look
Right,
at
'cause
that.
I'd like all the costs,
Sure.
please. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'd be glad to get that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Trainee?
Nobody cut all mine, don't worry about it.
Okay. Anyone else?
I'd just like to close by, I want to echo what Ms. Gray Jackson saying earlier. I recognize the needs to update and upgrade the technology as we need it and be, for lack of better terms, in advances rather than being so far behind. And that causes inefficiencies as well. So I'm not trying to be that harsh, but I am concerned about how we're dealing with the service side of it. When we're trying to, no offense, but this is support. This is the support side of getting the operations up to date. Not that it isn't critical, not that it isn't crucial, but we're looking at a great expense. We're taking up an awful lot of space. We're going through a lot of trouble to do this. And I just urge, and my direction from my perspective, and what I'm hearing, and this is from everybody, is that they don't mind the investment. The community wouldn't mind the investment, provided we're keeping up with our service line. And anything we're doing that to further stymie our operational side of it is not productive, it's not efficient, it's not effective. But thank you for all the work.
Seeing no other questions, Lance, we look forward to getting the questions that have been asked that you're going to follow up on. And very much appreciate the presentation.
Okay.
For that, adjourned.